Good evening, everybody. I come with you in the past, especially in the past 5 years. I've sometimes come to you on this date with sort of a heavy heart, but I come to you today with a very, very jubilant heart. On social media today, and I know a lot of you saw it, I said that I am dedicating this evening's interview at today's program to Rosemary Ellen Guiley, my longtime mentor who I met in 2009 when Tanya and I had an experience in Point Pleasant, West Virginia on the river having to do with Mothman. Well, today, of course, is the 5th anniversary of her passing, and those kind of numbers, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, so on and so forth, can tend to be very, very tough. But I've been in communication with her husband, Joe Redmiles, who may join us in the chat room this evening. And the coolest kind of thing happened this morning. I went out to our container garden on our back deck where I post pictures all the time of my wildflowers and all. And I had a pumpkin. For some reason, our squash, our pumpkin, our cucumbers are really kind of struggling this year. So I had a pumpkin plant that I had to put to rest and put wildflowers in the pot. Well, anyway, I knelt down to do so, and I looked down, and there was this tiny white moth, pure, bright, white, no bigger than the size of a dime, and it was caught in a spider web. And I was able to free it, and off it flew. And I just think that was a message from Rosemary that all is well. And as everybody knows, the world is struggling now. The United States is in a lot of chaos. So we find our peace. You know, Rosemary has shared with Tanya and I and so many other people abundant evidence that consciousness survives death, which is wonderful. And I think we have a terrific, very apropos show for you today. I love, as a writer and a novelist, I love when I can indulge and have someone on the show, and we try to, that there's a spiritual bent or a theological bent or this and that. You're going to meet Penelope Holt. I just had a chance to spend some time with her in the green room. Wonderful fellow playwright, fellow screenwriter, fellow novelist. We have a lot in common. Agrees that a conversation is so much better than an interview. So we are, and you're going to get to know her and her path. This wonderful book, I've actually read it twice in the past couple of months. I was asked to do a blurb, so I read it, and then I needed to do my book review. So with newmystics.com, go out and find it, or you can find it on Amazon. We're waiting for the Amazon approval. These days, it always takes a couple of days before they approve one of my reviews. But if you're on Goodreads, you can read it there. So I know that we have a lot of people in the audience who are fellow writers. Big shout out to Jessica Knuckles, her first, the Rhododendron Club, which I was honored to edit. So her first book has been published. It's great. I can add that to my list of first-time authors that I've worked with and edited. And also, anyway, there's a lot to talk about. We're going to go for an hour tonight. I know there's a lot going on out in the media world tonight that you all want to get back to as it pushes into 8 o'clock and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and roll the opening. And someone please remind me. I forgot last week, and I feel terrible. Friend of the show and guest, Barbara DeLong, has created a digital app for her Cosmic Deck of Initiation, and it is awesome. I love the cards. You guys know how much I love these cards because when you shuffle them, they make these great shapes and they feel great in your hand and all of that. But Tanya especially, she starts every day now by using the digital app. So I guess I just told you about that. So it's on Deckable. It's $20, but it's worth every penny. Barbara reads the descriptions of the cards to you, and anybody who's attended her programs on Nightlight or has seen the 2 times she's been on this show, which was an absolute blessing that she did that. She has a wonderful voice, very easy to listen to. You can do all kinds of things with the cards. You can journal. There's meditation sessions. It will keep a card history for you. And there's also several spreads, not the big, giant, every card in the deck foundation spread. There just isn't room in the app. But again, go to Deckables, go to the App Store, either Apple or for Androids, the Luddite, couldn't remember, but for Apple or Androids, right, for your iPhone or for your Samsung or what on and so forth. I have a Google Pixel, and yeah, get that. I'm going to be promoting this the next several weeks because Barbara needs our help, and this is an awesome, awesome product. So all of that is out of the way. We could use the rest of the time after the opening to talk to Penelope, which I'm very, very excited about. God bless all of you, and you know what that means. The universe, source, whatever, in these trying times. I'm so glad you made some time to be with us tonight. I think you're going to like Penelope very much. I will get to all of the people in the chat room during the intro and say proper hellos to every single one of you. So here we go with the opening. Tanya joins me. Always great to hear her voice at the top of the show. Music by our son Jeremy in the music composition program at Berklee School of Music. There exists a realm beyond our wildest dreams, a realm beyond reality that the gatekeepers and guardians have always told us consists of nothing but tricks of the eye, weather balloons, swamp gas, sand cranes, fairy tale myths of monsters, crackpot conspiracy theories, and desperate cries for attention.
We know this realm exists, and it's just beyond the horizon. The preset path, the well-worn walkways where the cynics want us to stay.
Instead, give this a listen. Put on your headphones, adjust your volume, close your eyes, and fasten your mental seatbelts because the twilight-tinged turnoff from reality's alluring highway is looming just ahead.
We're about to leave the plane of the easily explained, couldn't possibly be's, and the no way I just saw what I saw's, for the spaces and places where everything is possible, and if you stay long enough, even probable. We're about to take a journey into the outer realms. All right, so Joe Redmiles is with us tonight this evening. I just typed in the chat room, so those of you who listen to the show in 3 weeks on ERT Radio, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday nights, so you can hear this. I said that our thoughts and prayers and love are with you tonight. Rosemary Ellen Guiley passed away 5 years ago today and has sent many of us very promising, hopeful messages from the other side. And we may talk about that tonight with my guest. So I get to read lean in close to the mic and read her bio. I know that it is in here. I bet it's on the back cover. Penelope Holt was born and educated in the UK. She lives and works in New York and is the author of The Apple, Angels in Harlem, and Business Intelligence at Work. And of course, this brand new book just out that we're going to talk about tonight, The Angel Scroll. Please join me in welcoming Penelope Holt. Penelope, thank you for joining me.
Hey, Joey.
Hi, congratulations on your latest book.
Thank you. Thanks for the review, and thanks for reading it twice.
Well,
Rose's family read it twice. That's lovely.
So why don't you tell us your bio on the book was short, which is good because some people give us these long bios and there's nothing to tell. All the reveal is gone. There's no suspense. There's no mystery. It's all covered. So tell us about your background in as much detail as you'd like, and then how you transitioned into writing.
Well, I've always loved stories and words. I was very verbal as a small child. I often say that my mother was very quiet and short on words, would say, "Oh, please stop talking." So I was a great reader. I studied literature and linguistics, and I always wanted to write the great English American novel. But that's, it's like winning the lottery. But I got into business writing, speech writing, ghostwriting, book writing, co-authoring, just so that I could write every day. Because if you want to be a writer, you've got to write, right? So I've done a lot in marketing, advertising. But then in the 2000s, as my kids were getting older, I began to get back into creative writing. and I wrote The Apple, which is about the Herman Rosenblatt Holocaust a love story. It was if you know anything about it, it was on Oprah. He got into a lot of trouble for he had a true Holocaust story, but he did fabricate, and so that was a big cause célèbre. And I was asked to write the book in kind of a record time, and it was a heavy subject. Then I moved on to Angels in Harlem, which is was a biography with Alan Bailey, who co-founded the Harlem Gospel Choir. When I talk about that book, it was so great because he was part of the civil rights movement in that exciting time in the 60s in Harlem. He knew Muhammad Ali and Michael Jackson and Nina Simone and Miles Davis. So I would record him, and he would just talk about his life through this really momentous time in American history. So I did that. But this book, The Angel Scroll, is really, it's sort of me thinking out loud as a seeker, all of the questions that I've entertained about why are we here? What are we doing? Are miracles real? What happens to us when we die? What happens to our loved ones? Which is very fitting because you're talking about rosemary tonight. And as you were doing that, I kept hearing, you remember that old song, Love Grows Where My Rosemary Goes? And
yes.
Yeah, that's a great song. I was humming it in my head as you were talking about her.
Oh, wonderful.
So it's great to be here and talk to you about the stuff that I know you get knee deep in, these subjects.
Yeah, I do, and you're a playwright, and you're beginning your screenplay journey, which is awesome. Adapting the book, I'm so excited about that, because sometimes people say to us, "Oh, what do you write plays and you write screenplays and you write novels?" And yeah, all of them are different, but obviously you didn't let that hold you back. I mean, because at the core. Talk a little bit about this rather than me do it. At the core, story is story. Good story, the fundamentals of story, right? I mean, is that your approach to different styles of writing?
Yeah, and I think I think there are different narrative styles, and the lead character has a lot of interiority in this book. There's a lot of inner dialogue, but there's also a lot of exciting. There's a scavenger hunt for spiritual artifacts. They're seeking these miraculous paintings. It's sort of like a new Da Vinci Code, right? It takes all of these fringe religious theories and this ancient scroll that predicts a new gospel that is 3 paintings. And the lead character is a widow. She's having a lot of psychic experiences after her husband dies, and she channels this amazing painting. She channels it because it's far beyond her ability. And then she's plunged into this. She goes from this sort of humdrum life, married to a teacher, painter. She's a little painter. And now she's pulled into this supernatural sort of psychic, prophetic quest. And she's mourning, she really wants to believe that she's going to find her husband again. But she's, like we all are, she's frightened of believing in things that are illusions, that she's, that idea that I just want to comfort myself with an illusion, which makes us skeptical about, as we pursue these things. Want to be sure, right? As we seek the truth, we don't want to just cling on to sort of an empty hope. We want to be sure that what we're finding is real and true.
Right, and that's wonderful to take the journey with Claire, because she is resistant, and no matter where we are in our journey, we come to something new that tests us, and we go, okay, can we go through this door? So I think that was one. I mean, that's a lead character. We have to empathize with them, and we have to identify with them. And a really good writer has you insert yourself into the character without even realizing you're doing it. And he did a wonderful, wonderful job with that. I just want to backtrack a little to the apple. Oprah got in trouble a couple of times. I wasn't really keen on the apple one. I had to go and look that one up. But I was writing a play about drug and alcohol abuse right at the time that James Frey's A Million Little Pieces came out.
Yeah.
And that was also that same kind of thing. So tell us how you wound up coming in, and what was the goal of the apple, in light of that controversy of and Rosenthal it is, yeah, Rosenblatt. Rosenblatt was probably pushed by the publisher, and we've all been there. They say, oh, just enhance this a little, or this is a little weak. You know, they're looking at algorithms and all. So how did you get into that?
Well, I was approached by someone that was going to make the original book into a film, and then the book blew up. It was actually pulled. It was supposed to launch on Valentine's Day, and it had been printed, and it was in Penguin's warehouses. And I think the reason Penguin did the book was because Oprah said it was the greatest love story ever told, and then they wound up shredding it. And then it was about, for me, kind of looking at it through a different lens, because now the story became the story behind the story, right? What happened. Right. Because the story about the story was even bigger. The critics were saying that it was the greatest love story ever sold. And I just was fascinated because some people said it was unforgivable to lie about the Holocaust as a Holocaust survivor. Others were saying that Herman handed, critics of Holocaust deniers a cudgel. Everyone was angry, and I just tried to stay neutral. Herman was a perspective that I had too, and I'm not making excuses for him, but the war started when he was in second grade, and they were lived in ghettos. His father died in a Polish ghetto. His mother was sent to Treblinka. He and his three brothers went to several concentration camps and were liberated from Theresienstadt. And he was starved and beaten and almost blinded from beatings. And, one could say quite traumatized. A lot of survivors came out and never talked about it. He never talked about his experiences. And he loved attention. He loved, being the center of things. And he made up this story for I think it was a Daily News or New York Post Valentine competition, who wins the greatest love story. And he said that his wife that he met in Brooklyn after the war had thrown him apples in a concentration camp when they were children. And he sort of worked that into his true account. His true account was recorded by the Shoah Institute, and his brothers verified. And of course, I don't think he won the first prize. And then it just sort of escalated. He was approached by the guy who did Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Oh,
and then of course, and then it became to Oprah's attention. And then he was on the world stage. And I think he just loved, he was in his 70s. I think he just loved the attention and going to Chicago and staying in a hotel. And I think that he sort of wanted to back out of it. But then as he got more and more into it, it was difficult for him. And I also think that I'm not giving him a pass, but we often look at people who've been traumatized and understand that, sometimes they do things to cope with the past, or it sort of changes the way they behaved. Of course, that argument didn't wash with a lot of his critics, because they said that so many Holocaust survivors have given their true credible account in service of history, and that he sort of violated that. And I'm not disagreeing. What I say at the beginning of the book is, read the book and make up your mind. See what he went through, and then see. And some people say, oh, I can understand why he's human. I could understand why you get pulled into doing this. And other people say, absolutely not, no excuse, unforgivable. So it was a lot of different perspectives to sort of entertain or consider as I was writing the narrative for it. But he got a lot of hate, and it was sort of a shame, because it was very charged, and it was almost like an echo of his Holocaust experience, Yeah. And I did think on some level that they sort of dehumanized, because he was dehumanized going through the camps, and then he made an unfortunate mistake later in life. But because the stakes were so high with such a charged cultural issue, people sort of dehumanized him again and couldn't find their way to forgiving him. So Anyway, that is the long saga of the apple. And I had to research it and write it in quite a short period of time. And I did a lot of research, especially about children's experiences. And it was heavy. That was the war, you know, it was a dark period, and being steeped in that kind of history and up close accounts was kind of grueling. And then in dealing with, you know, people didn't like the book. The book was written, and thought it was I was being an apologist for him. And I called him one day. He's passed now, Herman. And I just said, "Oh, Herman, you know, people are getting very angry." And he said, "What are you going to do?" You know, he after what he'd been through, it was, you know, it was small potatoes.
Yeah. And that's our job as storytellers, is not to explain anything to anybody, is to present them with the characters, present them with their lives. And I admire John Steinbeck. There's plenty of writers, and I'm also an actor, and I take this approach too. You can't look at a character and go, "Oh, they're evil, and I'm going to portray them as evil." Their motivations, their life experiences are just different than ours. I don't want to give anything away in the book, but you have a character that's very dark. He makes some of Dan Brown's darker religious characters, and you don't put any weight on it. He explains, or, you know, through your narrative, you explain why he came to where he was. He had a life history. So I applaud that you did that. You know, that word apologist is very, very loaded and unfortunate, because I can't imagine, especially when Oprah called, who's like the kingmaker in a lot of sectors, but certainly for many writers, and James Frey got hooked into it, and his publisher was complicit in pushing him. And I could see somebody going, you know what could make that story really pop, if like you had a connection to the woman and she made this you know, the apple is so heavily symbolic. But we are here mostly to talk about the Angel Scroll, and I have so many questions for you. It revolves so heavily around painting. And my wife has just really begun the journey of painting and is so immersed in it and loves it, the experimentation. Are you a painter?
I am what you call a Sunday painter, which means I'm an amateur. I do it as a hobby. I love it. I really got into it at some point, and you know, went after it. And I found that it used a different. I'm so immersed in words; they're my stock in trade. You use a different. You feel like you use a different part of your brain when you paint, and it's a creative experience. It's very different from writing. And in the book, the new gospel will be 3 paintings, 3 miraculous healing paintings that, when they're put together, will create a miracle. And as I explain in the book, Joey, in the Renaissance period, before people could read and there was a printing press and they didn't have their own Bibles, the story of Jesus and his church were told through paintings and iconography in churches. They're splendid. I mean, I find that really beautiful. You have a lot of sacred geometry. You have the vesicapiscus, the flame shaped.
Yes.
Sacred geometry features heavily in the book. And there's there's a direct experience when you look at a beautiful sunset or a beautiful work of art. It's a soul opening. It's a different experience. So I really wanted, and then when the reformers came along in Christianity, they said it was idolatrous, and they wanted to strip out all of that, those paintings and all of that idolatry and that extra, and just have it be the Word and the Bible, and have a personal relationship with God through the Word of the Bible. And I'm a great believe you me, I'm a big believer in the power of the Word and that we speak things into existence. But I just thought I just like the idea of having the paintings being the inspirational, the transformational vehicle in the book.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all my I grew up Catholic, Roman Catholic, and my first experience of a 3-act play, of a 3-act story, was the Stations of the Cross. And it was these powerful images that all this was going on up at the front of the church, and I was just enamored by Jesus's journey told in these
in these visuals. I really appreciate, plus the triptych. So many famous churches and cathedrals all around the world have these triptychs, you know, this 3-act
Well, it's
play.
it's a trinity, right? The power of you get a numeracy, you get sacred geometry. There's so much that you can pack into religious iconography that you don't even know what you're looking at. It's a gestalt, you know, it's activating so many things, and also archetypes. So we have the Christ consciousness, we have the Madonna, we have all of that is at play in Catholic art. And I think it's really beautiful.
I do too. A very prevalent archetype in the book is the martyr. So the prophecies, there seems to be this, and I'm going to go really carefully to pique the audience's interest and give nothing away, because y'all need to order this on Amazon or wherever you buy your books. You really need to do. It's beautiful summer reading. I read it twice because it's a good, well-paced read. But is that a fascination for you? This idea that heavy, you know, I think of the stigmata. I think of hagiography, of course, because growing up Catholic, Saint Catherine and Saint Teresa and the piercing and the roses.
Saint Francis too, and there was a great. You remember that great movie, The Stigmata, with what's her name, Patricia Arquette. Yeah, and it's funny you talk about. I went to convent school, Catholic school in England, and the nuns were from the Order of the Cross and Passion, which is the station, the Passion. You know, patio, compassion literally means to suffer with, right? It comes from patio, I suffer in Latin. So the Order of the Cross and Passion, that was their focus, was the Passion of the Christ. Which movie I did watch the original Mel Gibson movie. I could only stomach it one time because it was so, he said, authentically brutal. And it was authentically brutal. So yeah, I was sort of steeped in that. And there's you know Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese, the Buddhist. Yeah,
absolutely.
He wrote a great book that I would recommend to your listeners called Buddha and Jesus as Brothers. And he sort of compares the spiritual power of both of them. But he says in the book, I think it's in that book, he says, why do Christians have this symbol of the crucifixion? It's so cruel. It's, you know, and I think this Easter, even though I'm not as, you know.
Oh, geez. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. This Easter, I was really thinking about, it struck me in a different way, even after all these years. The Good Friday is a sort of a really important day for me. And I think it's that what's written about, that in order to really understand man's suffering, Christ had to experience as the Son of Man, the deepest suffering, even to the point that he felt that God, who he was, had abandoned him. He'd abandoned himself. I mean, that is the ultimate despair when he said, Father, why have you deserted me? So, you know, there's just that resonance of deep suffering, and then the triumph of resurrection, and, you know, pulling aside the veil and moving to the other side. So I don't know if the suffering wasn't as deep, that the euphoria of salvation and resurrection would be as intense, right?
Right. And we grew up in that, and my friends in other religions would say, wow, that's violent, heavy stuff that you Catholics grow up under. But there is you know, Good Friday is, and Father, why have you forsaken me? We've all asked that in weak moments. And I think Claire does, your main character, and many of them do. So there are so many wonderful, like, these kinds of theological thrillers, as I term them, demand exotic locales. And how many, because it's global. You live in New York, of course. You were raised in the United Kingdom, but Brazil and Italy and some of these other, France. How many of these places have you actually been to?
Well, mostly Europe. I grew up in the UK, and there's a lot of sacred spaces. Glastonbury. I write about Glastonbury Tor, which
That's
is
my favorite part.
the Druid. It was where they. And did you catch that part that the word enchanted literally comes from the Druidic choirs, that they would enchant the land. They would walk around enchanting the land, chanting 24/7. So I wrote about Glastonbury Tor and sacred places in Israel. There's a Benedictine monastery in Jerusalem and France and Rome, of course, and Siena. Catherine of Siena, the Duomo there. She was a great Catholic mystic. She couldn't read or write, but she had these ecstatic visions, which Claire has ecstatic visions. So all the stuff that interested me. And I loved the Da Vinci Code for that reason, that it tied together a story and this pursuit of a spiritual artifact and brought in all of these sort of fringe, the story of Mary Magdalene being with Jesus. And so it was just an alternative storyline from, what Christians typically follow. So the idea behind the book is that the Angel Scroll, which is a recently found Dead Sea Scroll, prophesies these three paintings. And it also works with the story that Jesus went to India, and that he was influenced by, if he had been in a scene, one of the sects at that period, he would have been influenced by Hinduism. Yeah. Because Hinduism influenced the Egyptian mysteries, which Moses was schooled in because he was the adopted child of Pharaoh, adopted grandson of Pharaoh. So it was fascinating to me. I didn't know this. You forget that those religions are so intertwined and they're so close culturally and geographically that they were working on each other. And we can get into our segregated faith systems and just forget the roots, the origins of where it all came from and how interconnected it is. So
yeah. Oh, I absolutely agree. I lost my train of thought a little because I was listening so intently to you, because I was hooked into all of those things. So that there actually is an Angel Scroll. It's highly controversial. Some people say it's authentic. Some people say it isn't. How did that relate to the writing the book? Did you happen to just learn about the Angel Scroll and said, "Oh, I think there's a deeper story here"? What was the correlation?
Well, I got a thing for angels, which I think many people do, right?
Yeah.
And they're so fascinating, the shape of them, in the Old Testament, the descriptions of angels and their relevance and what they do and what they mean, and the archangels. I mean, they're just such massive spiritual symbols. And then when I stumbled upon this report that this new Dead Sea Scroll was found in 1999, the Jerusalem Post wrote about, a lot of people wrote about it. And a scholar had seen drawings of it and was pretty convinced it was real. It was found on the Jordanian side of the Dead Sea. Well, the originals were found in the 40s, 47 to 56, I think. So there's a lot of excitement that there could be a new scroll, because the original scrolls were such a treasure trove.
Yeah.
And it looked like it was real. And then as time went by, people said, we're not finding it, we're not seeing it. We haven't seen real evidence, only drawings and hearsay and reports. But by that time, I'd already cottoned onto it, and I was already, my imagination was racing. So I took the idea that a new scroll had been found, but I changed the prophecy. I just used it as a jumping off point to prophesy these three miraculous paintings.
Yeah. Wonderful. And it's a world of high finance and intrigue. This is me, folks, really kind of sell you on. It's at the Vatican, and people are buying paintings for $1.5 million, $1.5 million, because of the effect that the paintings are having on people, the idea of the healings. I found the two young male painters absolutely fascinating in their journey, and it's heartbreaking, and they, again, not want to give anything away, but they really walk a path of thorns and glass. They really they walk the Via Dolorosa in their own ways. I mean, they just do. So you could see, folks, how much this, I talk about being Catholic all the time. Very weird. I was doing a presentation in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I was talking about the paranormal and President Eisenhower signing treaties with aliens. And after, the host, the moderator, came up to me and said, way more controversial than aliens was the fact that you're a Catholic in Oklahoma. So I don't even know. But this brought out to me, I almost, after I made my confirmation, I decided that I wanted to be a priest. But I just thought girls were just the nicest thing that I wanted to spend time with and get to know. And that's not why I did it. But even though in my early 20s, like so many do, is I started to look at all these different spiritual systems. And I have several books. Jesus in India is just one of them. It makes so much sense that he spent time there. I really believe it.
Yeah, you've read the book, isn't it? Yeah,
yes.
The hidden years, the missing years between 12, when he went to the temple, and he said to Mary, why wouldn't you expect to find me in my father's house, right? And then when he started his ministry, they think around at the age of 30. And of course, we don't know. I mean, this is all a narrative that is written that we take on truth. But assuming those were the missing years, the hidden years, there's every reason to believe it's only a hop, skip, and a jump from where he lived that he would travel around, and that if he was an Essene and he was influenced by Hinduism, because the Essenes believed in reincarnation, they did not believe in animal sacrifice. They thought the temple was defiled. They worshipped a solar calendar. They were very non-violent, ahimsa, which Gandhi is famous for, Martin Luther King. So if you read the book, there's scholars. So again, people debunk it and say, nah, he was never in India, like they know for sure. Yeah. But there are scholars that have found evidence and proof that he was, that the stories told about it. So it's so cool that you're a Catholic, though, because there's so much, when Christ was on the cross, he was crucified with two thieves, two criminals. Yeah. And he said, at the end of today, you will be in heaven with me and my Father. So that and I didn't even, when I was writing it, there's so many references. It just shows how your unconscious works, when you're steeped in this sort of religious symbolism, and then it just it makes its way into what you're writing.
Yeah. I have a storytelling book that's out that was like 30 years of my career, and it culminated in this book. Every day is a story all its own. And I'm going to do an episode on the show, folks, later in the summer. The difference between ritual and spectacle. And Catholicism really walks that really fine line between ritual and spectacle. And I was always just intuitively fascinated by the rituals. The bread and the wine, transmogrification, the incense, which used to make me so sick, and now I burn it all the time. But I would have to leave the church on every high holy day because it would just overwhelm me. But I think the reason it overwhelmed me because I was a kid who the scale of it and the ritual of it so bordered on spectacle, right? The robes, the costumes, all those kinds of things. And I get a sense of that in the book being in these paintings, because as you talked about, painting is nonverbal, but yet the three paintings tell a very clear story. that Claire, as her psychic abilities come and all these scholars come out and they have these great discussions, a story emerges, and it's really a story of hope. So let's go there, because the time is going by. I really, in my blurb that I wrote for the press kit that your publicist asked me to write, and I loved doing it. And also in my book review, you really meld this. Speaking of romances, a romance for the ages, you take a man and a woman who have suffered terrible, terrible loss. And I've been married for 27 years, and it is unimaginable. And here we are with Joe, who's mourning a loss after 5 years. So this is a heavy thing. And Joe, I apologize, but it's so core to the book that they find each other, and it's not easy. Through the book, you make it really not easy. And I don't want to get too personal, but it feels like on some level in your life, you've had this level of loss that you can, it's so there. Beyond writers write what you know. I felt in my gut that this loss on some level.
Yeah, and most recently I lost my sister, who was my best friend,
Oh, so
lifelong
sorry.
friend, 2 years ago, and it was it was really felt like an amputation because she was so full of life. She was, some people, they sort of fade away, but she was just so alive, and it seemed very unfair. And I think that's the jumping off point for a lot of people. I mean, I was already on a spiritual journey, but it pushed me deeper into that because I was so down. I thought if I don't actively start turning towards the light and, living with optimism and gratitude and acceptance and all those things. And of course, that burning desire to say, where are you? Looking for butterflies and robins and all of we start to look for those symbols and those clues that the person is still there. And I think they are there. And it just when you're going along in your day-to-day life, you can forget about those things, but loss makes it very urgent, right? It makes looking for those things and finding those bridges very immediate and urgent, because that's all you want. You just want the comfort that you're going to see them again. You want to know where they are, what are they now? And not just have the despair that they're gone forever. And that's where Claire is. But she's skeptical because she doesn't, like I said at the beginning, she doesn't want false hope. She doesn't want to just, spoon feed herself, cheap comfort. So she's a skeptic. And I think we all are. I love people who are certain about what they believe. I'm not certain, but I am very curious, and I'm always open to hearing what other people's experiences are and the path that they've trodden and what's brought them comfort and understanding and knowing and a sense of truth. Yeah. And that's what she's doing. She, like you said, she meets a Benedictine monk and a Buddhist monk and an anthropologist who studies goddess worship. And her doctor tells her she's just having problems with her, that she's got a physical problem. So she's got all of these different versions and explanations for what she's going through, which is kind of us in life, right? We find these different paths. You talk to people who say the Akashic records, or it's mediumship, or and you're sort of trying to weigh it all up and integrate it and understand where it rests for you. So poor Claire, she's having paranormal experiences. She's channeled a work of art. She's got these visions through the Vesica Piscis, and she doesn't know what the heck is happening to her. She's mourning her husband, and then this attractive man comes into her life, and she doesn't know how to feel about that, which is another level of grief, right? Because on the one hand, you know that life goes on, but on the other hand, you feel like it's some kind of betrayal if you let go of the person, right? Yeah. So all of these forces are working on her.
And at the same time, she's a catalyst. She's an analog. She's a channel and a medium for Richard to work through his thing. And she's so strong about, I'm not going to fully engage with you until you're fully present. And that's wonderful. So Claire carries a lot. And I'll be honest with you, male, female, doesn't matter, especially in this drama, this genre. As much as I love Paul Christopher, he cannot write female characters. They're overwrought, and he uses them as a mechanism for the audience of asking stupid questions so that he can educate the audience. Claire is beautifully, beautifully written, and she's, with very few exceptions, like the anthropologist, she's really surrounded by men. I mean, it's very masculine energy in the we do hear from one of the painters, very, very close friends, so she's in it. We hear a lot about one guy who's on, you have this wonderful redemption arc. Again, I don't want to give anything away, but the student who was sort of redeemed, and now he's redeemed, and he pays this price. But I wouldn't ask this except, and let me just guess, because it was on your question. So working through all of this, loss of your sister, what I said about Rosemary sending back these messages, and even the little moth this morning, reincarnation is thorny. There's a basis for it in Catholicism.
some of the prophets are reincarnated. John the Baptist is reincarnated. Maybe Jesus is reincarnated. Is it inappropriate to ask what your position is on reincarnation?
Well, I was chatting with someone about this yesterday, that, another theme in the book, and people are like, oh my goodness, how many themes are in this book? But there's a lot of metaphysics. New science is really new Western science and philosophy, physics, is actually starting to prove out spiritual belief, right? The nature of consciousness, that consciousness is primary, that everything arises from consciousness. Consciousness doesn't emerge from the brain or AI, or, the Bernardo Kastrup said, you're not going to get a computer to be sentient, conscious. So science is proving that out. And, if anyone's heard me speak about Donald Hoffman, who is a philosopher of mind, he's coming up with these theories of a deeper reality where there is no space or time. And, Eckhart Tolle, spiritual traditions talk about the eternal now, right? And we just have this illusion of time and space. And so that is kind of a conundrum, right? So if there is no time and space, are there sequential lives? Or is it more that you have immediate access to all lives of all beings, right? So I like to kind of play with that idea, because it's indicative of how, if you live in a 4-dimensional reality where everything is out there, and time and space, and aliens coming from the future, coming from the past, or do we just live in the eternal now, where everything lives in consciousness? And I always say, if angels and aliens exist in consciousness, then they exist fundamentally. Yeah. And I don't really look for the evidence out there per se. I'm just more interested in the experience, because everything is experiential, right?
Yeah.
People are telling you through their own experience what happened to them. They were abducted, or they met, or they communed with. So to me, it always goes back to, tell me the experience that you had. And I never denigrate anyone else's experience, because I believe that if the archetype or the psychic artifact exists in consciousness, then it's the proof of it is that's the experience of it. Am I making sense?
Absolutely. I am so with you. Yeah, I'm gonna have trouble falling asleep tonight, because I'm gonna talk to Tanya, who does a lot of work with hypnotic regression and soul contact and all. I know we're gonna talk tonight, as we're falling asleep, about, if we're in the internal now, how do these sequential lives work? That's very interesting. And I learned a thing, and I don't want to spend too much time on this at all, but the soul can actually have 6 current, that they know about or theorize about, 6 current incarnations. So like your soul could sort of like, so I guess, yeah.
Who knows? I think it's more complicated than we think it is, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it really is.
Say, and people, we know so little, we see so little. I always say this: we can't see microscopically, we can't see telescopically, we can't see at the quantum level. We cognize through our physical senses, which are very, very limited. We see nothing of what is really there, and yet we're so sure that we know everything, right?
I know. Somebody asked me my opinion on something, with everything that's going on politically and all, because I do a bunch of shows on those kinds of things. And I said, I know what it was even more. They had this strange paranormal experience where this kind of dark entity either followed them from a house to a house around the corner, or the whole neighborhood is sort of this psychically active place. And they asked my opinion on it. The first thing I said is, the only thing we know is what we don't know. And I'm totally cool with that.
Yeah.
Because that allows us, I think, to create these kind of work. So thank you for that. That's because I've done shows, I've seen readings where a deceased says, I've chosen my new parents and I'm going to come back. And it's like, oh, wow, this is exciting. And it seems to give the family so much peace. Yeah. And then for some of us, the goal is to never come back here again. Like, oh, I hope this is my bodhisattva round, so I could just be done and go be a hippie light, in the universe. So that's very interesting. Let me just look here. And, as a writer, as a craftsperson, I love how you manage the meta and the micro, as I like to call it. So there are these very big ideas. I mean, prophecies that could potentially change the world and a second coming of Christ, and this idea that prophecy is attached to, but then there's my marriage was okay till it wasn't okay. Then we separated, we came together, but we weren't together enough to prevent. Guys, I'm talking around all this in purpose here. Yeah, one of our people in the audience is saying their husband says, "I'm done. I'm not coming back." I think that's almost a guarantee that we're gonna come back. But I love the meta and the micro. That's the way I think it should always be, because that's how we're always living. We're having this very human experience, but there's this. So is that a theme in your work that you're very conscious of?
Yeah, because I think there's this constant like telescoping of perspective, because there's that scene with Richard and Claire where she says, you know, it's all far-fetched. She doesn't want to, but she doesn't want to like fall into being naive. And he's very pragmatic, and he says, isn't it a miracle that we're sitting here on this planet, you know, revolving around the sun? We don't know where we came from. We don't know where, you know, we take them everyday miracles for granted, right? We just, oh yeah, we're in this world, and the sun is just at the right distance, and all of these beautiful flowers, and we've got these theories about evolution, but they're spectacularly beautiful and in harmony, but there are no miracles, you know, there are no miracles. So we sort of telescope between sort of understanding the miraculous and then being in sort of the nitty-gritty sucky parts of life. You know, how can you go from having like a transcendent experience to like looking at a sunset, or just having one of those open-hearted moments, and then just finding yourself in the clutches of frustration, or because of some stupid minutia that you've gotten worked up about that you won't even remember a week from now, right? Yeah. So that's just the nature of life, this sort of telescoping of experience. And you know, I used to have a friend who used to say, she was born again Christian. She was a wonderful person. And she used to say, you know, you can be in the Lord 1% of the day, or you can be in the Lord 100% of the day. And what she was saying was, you can choose to have the perspective or to frame your life in a way that feels heavenly or feels hellish. And I want to be glib about that, because clearly people have real problems, and we all have real blind spots and things that seem insurmountable. And if there's a solution, we don't know what it is, right? So I'm not being glib, but we do have those moments that open up where you do have sort of a perspective where you're like, I get it, and it's good. All of it's good.
And I think of different things that we grew up right there, but for the grace of God go I. That has been my mantra, to stay grounded. I said to some folks today, we were talking about all the turmoil and the chaos, and I said, you know what? Here's my new motto: live fearlessly, love fiercely. But if I do it 80% of the time, like, I am going to be happy with that. And I think that's what Claire chooses. Is that, you know, and I think that's her message as I read it for Richard, like, we're never going to be 100% healed. You are not a replacement for Jake, nor am I a replacement for, but we can reinvent. A second cousin-in-law lost my second cousin, who I love dearly. She had MS, and for decades she just had a terrible time. And he posted, you know, a year later now, after her death, he posted a picture with him and his new girlfriend. And I find such hope, and I hope I'm with Tanya till the very, very end, and we go together, and you know, and neither one of us has to face that. But I was just thinking, yay, you. Like, that is us, and that does not diminish my cousin. It celebrates what they had.
That's that tension, right? Of, is this okay? Am I allowed to be happy again, right? Is that a betrayal to find happiness? And I think it's wonderful. Some spouses say, you know, I want you to be happy. I would want my husband to be happy. Because I want my children to be happy. And I think kids are happy when they see their parents happy, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, let me just go down and make sure that I did not. I think we covered just about everything that I wrote. Oh, there's a question here. Have you always had a love and interest in the ancient and antiquity?
Oh yeah, I mean, because they're stories, aren't they? They come down to us as stories, and they're archetypal, because I think that we have a psychic framework for pattern and story, right?
Yes.
So I know even in advertising, the notion of the gestalt, you want to create symbols that have a complete meaning. So if I show you Superman, you're going to get, if I put Superman, the S on someone's shirt, you're immediately going to project a lot of association. And so stories are loaded with all of that meaning, that rich meaning that it triggers in us. And so some symbols, trigger the crucifix, the swastika. Those are pretty universal associations. And then, of course, you get into symbols that have very personal meaning for people, like moths and butterflies and whatnot. But yeah, I love antiquity, and I love religious, religious stories and parables, because there's so much meaning packed into them, right?
Yes.
And I went to university in York in the north of England, which was it's over 2,000 years old. It was the place that when the Romans Julius Caesar invaded in 55 BC, they set up their camp, a walled city in York. And then when they went back, when the Huns and the Goths were attacking Rome and they retreated, then the Vikings came charging through. Right. So there's Romans and Vikings and Celts and everything in between. And the French came, and so it's just the story of my own country and all of the invaders and all the different cultural elements. And you see it in England. You see these cathedrals across Europe that literally took centuries to build.
Yeah.
What's that great book, The Pillars of the Earth?
Yes, Pillars of the Earth. Yeah, and there's a sequel.
Oh, is that?
I've read both of them. That. Wonderful.
Yeah. I read it, and then I got it on Audible again, because isn't that a great subject to talk again, like the macro and the micro?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the story of the stonemason working on the cathedral and his medieval life, primitive, brutal life, against this grandeur of these super-sized religious, edifices to the divine. I mean, it's such a great tension for a book, right?
Your book is actually going to sit in very close proximity to Pillars of the Earth. Ken Follett, I believe.
Ken Follett, that's right.
Yeah, and there is a sequel where the next generation kind of takes over. I think it's the Stonecutter's son or something like that. I would like to, before I let you go, there's a couple things here that the audience commented on that I would love your thoughts on. One said, how do dreams of the deceased factor in with these connections? Is that reaching out or them speaking to us? We do get in some information from Claire's about Claire's husband through dreams, right?
Yeah, in fact, her whole story, she deciphers through dreams.
Yeah.
Because I think dreams are, the Buddhists believe that we dream when we're asleep and we dream when we're awake. That, right. And they do dream yoga, lucid dreaming, so that they can stay conscious through their dreaming. And so I love the idea of dreams. And I think the material that comes in dreams, it's sort of more symbolic. Waking dreams are just sort of more stable and consistent and consensual. Right? Some people would say that we're sharing the same dream. You're in my dream, I'm in my dream, I'm in your dream. But then when we go to sleep, the dreams get a little bit more of an acid trip feeling to them, right? But, so yeah, and when I've gone to psychics, like after I lost my sister, she said, she'll come in dreams. And again, it's an experience. I dream about my sister. I dream about people I've lost. I get a distinct feeling. I get messages, I get feelings of love, I get feelings of connection. Sometimes it's almost like you've had a visit with them, that they've come and had a cup of tea with you and you've caught up. And that's going back to what I said, that people have experiences like Claire, and then they look for explanations.
Mm-hmm.
And then we start fighting about the explanations. And if someone has an experience, but what is it that could say it's valid to me?
Right.
Because I think experience, everything this idea that there's a concrete world out there, and then anything that we dream of or acts of imagination or creativity are somehow less real. To me, it's all coming from the same source. We're co-creators with God, right? So we're creating, everything starts as an act of imagination.
Yeah.
Computers, rocket ships, airplanes. So I don't know why we poo-poo imagination or creative experiences or outlandish experience or fringe experiences that people have. I don't know why we, want to kick them to the curb. Although I think we can get carried away. You and I both know Mary Medeiros, who reads the records. I've said this before about Mary. She's such a sensible person, isn't she?
Yes.
She comes across as so sort of sensible and steady and common sense and down to earth and grounded. And yet she's reading the Akashic records. So you've got this, and it's very comforting because you're like, this is a common sense, down to earth person, but she's really talking about these extraordinary things. And I think they're more palatable when they come through grounded people.
I agree. As you know, she's a very accomplished, multiple Emmy award-winning director. And as a director, that's a very orderly, it's a very sensible, yet you're responsible for taking the playwright or screenwriter's vision, funneling it through all of these other creatives and making it coherent and presenting it. So that makes perfect sense to me for Mary. Like, I love the director archetype. I really, really do.
That's a really great insight that I hadn't sort of tied together, that she operationalizes the imagination, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're talking about. A fulcrum moment for me was reading Don Juan, right? Carlos Castaneda.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And Carlos Castaneda imagines that he's a bird and then like really believes it. And he says to Don Juan, like, did that really happen? And he says, if you believed it, it happened.
Yeah.
And that was for a Catholic kid who, like, talk about like the push pull, the telescoping you were talking about. Like, miracles are okay for certain people, but if you claim to have a miracle, there's investigations, you're excommunicated, all this. So the nature of miracles and who's allowed to experience a miracle, and that was a moment in my early 20s where I went, no, wait a minute. So to loop back, Herman Rosenblatt, who knows where the lie, the imagination, and the truth.
That's exactly what he said. I don't know if you've ever had memories where you sort of had you inserted something into the memory for whatever reason, that it becomes, and he said it was like a hole in the wall. It was a patch, and then it became part of the wall. And people said, oh, you're lying. You're just, you're rationalizing, you're fabricating, you're just trying to wriggle out of it. But he believed, ironically enough, the book was called Angel at the Fence, the Penguin book. Angel again, you see. And he did, to survive the camps, he did have these connection to his mother that he believed she came to him in dreams. And so I thought that when I was doing the book, Joey, that his imagination and how he used it to soften the trauma, I could see the lines getting blurred. Don't get me wrong. I think he knew that once he went on Oprah and they kept saying, are you sure? And it wasn't the publisher. He went on Oprah and then the publisher approached him. But
oh, I see.
And I think he knew. He just sort of, but I do think there was an element in when it began that it was a story he told himself.
Yeah.
And they say that I was telling a friend today that tyranny is the willful removal of nuance. And
yes.
I think his story was very nuanced. And I think people were too quick to just make him bad and awful and just the worst without, you can be discerning and say that was wrong. You shouldn't have done that. But at the same time, understand the nuance of what might have been playing into his story and his drive to fabricate.
That is beautiful. Since at least 9/11, I have been mourning the death of complexity. life is terribly complex, and we get in trouble because we have these factions that are stronger than ever. And people bat around the word fascism, but anytime you have these polar extremes, fascism is just coming from both sides and meeting in the middle, and that's why that becomes a zeitgeist. There's a, oh, that's fascism, oh, he's a fascist, so this is because the whole thing together through these polarities. I do a lot of work in my storytelling talking about taking dualities and adding a third, a mediator, so they become something different. They become a triad, and there's again the trinity, the triptych, all of that different kind of stuff. I want to, before I ask you what you're working on, like we're a little over time. Is that okay?
Oh, it's fine by me. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. Someone in our audience, a very, very dear friend of ours who went through immeasurable, terrible, terrible losses in her life, says, after all the losses I've had, there is guilt returning to happiness. And another one of our folks in the chat room said, we just have to keep reminding ourselves that they would want us to be happy. I'm going to give you the last word on those themes because I think they're very prevalent in this book.
Yes, I don't think, talk about the Catholic Church. A friend once said to me, guilt is a wasted emotion. It's an absolutely useless emotion. And I think that, I have my brother just passed recently too. And I just have this idea that all of these amazing near-death experiences that are on the web now, this Next Level Soul. And I mean, there's just dozens and dozens and dozens of really heartfelt experiences. And they return home, right? They have these near-death, and they have this feeling of going home, and it's peaceful and everything makes sense, right? I know why I came. I know what happened. So I think that, we get to the other side and we're like, oh, wasn't it silly that I thought that way? What did I do that for? And, we have a perfect perspective. And I just see them on the other side with that level of perspective, wanting you to be happy.
Yeah.
That there's no virtue in, they're not sitting there saying, what's this? Why aren't you mourning me? There's a complete understanding and there's a complete perspective, and you're going on with your journey, and the goal is, they asked the Dalai Lama, they said, what is the purpose of life? And he said, to be happy. Yes. And after my sister died, I had a daily mantra. I said, I want to live with gratitude, acceptance, optimism, and purpose in honor of her. Because really, if I'm sitting around moping and being unhappy, and is that celebrating her? Is that honoring her? No, I think honor them by being happy. I think they'll rejoice in seeing us happy. So in a way, it's noddy if you're not happy.
Right. And I think that
to grief.
Yeah. That is a beautiful summation for where we started tonight and where Joe is at, and all the things we've talked about. Before I let you go, with immense gratitude, because I could talk to you all evening, but we're not allowed to do that. What are you working on next?
I'm working on the screenplay for the Angel Scroll.
Oh, nice. That is super exciting. It is so cinematic. That's part of the reason why it reads. There is no fat, nothing slows it down. And to have this global theological thriller with prophecy and all, and have this wonderful, complicated, in all the best ways, love story, I just applaud you. Author to author, novelist to novelist. I just applaud you.
Some wax said, you're going to need $1 gazillion budget to make this thing, all the places that you, and I said, I don't know. Have you ever heard of CGI? So,
yeah.
It can be done.
Yeah, I get paid up front to write screenplays, and producers come to me and say, here's the budget. So there's this scene where X happens. We absolutely cannot do it. So part of what we're paying you for is to figure it out. I have a dear, dear, dear playwright friend who, when I read the drafts of his plays, I go, dude, they'll never be able to put this on stage. And he goes, that's not my job. And as the writer, it's not your job. They will figure out how to do it. You're absolutely right. I applaud you. Are you thinking sequel for this, or is this a
Oh yeah,
standalone?
there's a lot to go. And as I say often to my husband, don't bore me with the details.
No, don't give anything away, nothing at all away. Folks who, and I know they're going to want to, because you're absolutely delightful and articulate and clearly talented. If people want to follow you, follow your work, get to know more about you, I have your website scrolling across the screen here so they can clearly see that. How else would you prefer to be contacted or followed? Or
Yeah, just penelopeholt.com.
all right,
I'm
great.
so busy writing, I don't do as much justice to the social media. Although someone was telling me that you really should just funnel people into one place, that
Yeah.
you really don't want to chop up the following. So penelopeholt.com, and you can reach me through the site and read some of the blogging I do on the different research elements that I did. And thank you, Joey. Thanks for having me. It was a great chat. You forget that you're talking to a whole bunch of people. You think you're just having a visit over a glass of water, don't you?
Well, that's yes, exactly. And sometimes, like the research and reading the books and all the prep, I go, "Oh my gosh, 200 and what now? 17 episodes. Do I really want to do this?" And I say, I get the privilege of just, I've not, I want to keep the audience involved. I look in the chat room, but I go, how privileged have I been to have hundreds of conversations with amazing people like yourself? And so thank you for being indulgent and allowing it to be a conversation rather than just an interview. The audience loves that. And we're getting great, another great show. Thank you for tonight. Wonderful guest. So visit PenelopeHolt.com. I am going to be very curious how the screenplay goes and what happens with that. Did you know that today is Mary's birthday?
Oh, I didn't. Thank you for
Well,
telling me.
now you know, and you got a couple hours to.
I
She's
have
in.
time to send her
Yeah, a message, and please tell her I said hello. I messaged her this morning and said happy birthday. But we're a growing, expanding club of like minds, and so thank you so much.
Thank you, Joey. Thank you very much, and I hope we speak again. I loved it. And Dia told me, she said, "You're gonna love Joey."
And the same way around. I get so nervous for these things. You meet someone 3 minutes before you have to ask them to open up their lives for an hour. So I get a little nervous. You made it very easy. Thank you.
Thank you, Joey.